there's a couple, brief moments where I went, whatever. Welcome to Musing. Every once in a while, my brother George and I would have these conversations about music. Music is our passion, and it's a huge part of our lives, and we decided to share those conversations with you. So if you love music, sit back and enjoy this podcast. Okay, welcome back to Musing. Got my brother on the line.
How we doing?
Good. Today is a classic. Today we're hitting that.
Today's a conversation that has to be had.
Everybody that listens to this type of music and this genre and this, I found out they're actually heavy metal. If you look them up on Wikipedia, they're a heavy metal band. If you
call shenanigans on that. But
well, I agree too. But if you like this genre of music, the Sammy Hagar, David Lee Roth question has to come up at some point in time in some conversation, usually over, copious amounts of alcohol and, stupid parties. But we're going to do it, this morning on the podcast. But,
where do you begin?
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think of where I begin. We were just talking a second ago before we signed on. What was the time frames on them?
When I actually researched a little bit, I didn't realize that they started in 72.
Yeah.
But David Lee Roth was basically 74 to 85. And
yeah, I see that now. Okay.
Hagar was 85 to 96. And then sadly mentioned Gary Sharon from 96 to 98. And
then, we'll definitely touch on that a little bit later. But yeah,
Roth made an appearance back, and they actually released another album in early 2000s. I think 2000. I don't know when, 2003, something like that. With Roth, and actually they're still touring with Roth as we speak. Sadly.
Yes. So.
Let's you go. You go.
I get to go first.
Well, you don't have to. But
let's do the statements. Let's I am David Lee Roth. I
am Sammy Hagar.
Yeah,
so that's where this is going to get fun.
I don't. So for me, it doesn't have anything to do with attitude. Well, I guess it kind of does, but it doesn't have anything to do with outside the band attitude.
Right.
So, what political affiliations or party affiliations or whatever they've got outside doesn't really have anything to do with this decision for me. It's purely about, what we care about. It's purely about music. It's purely about how that music fits with voices, how the voices fit with the music, how the band attitudes. Now that part does play into it a little bit, but
this is 100% about the band Van Halen. I know we always say Van Halen and Van Hagar and so on and so forth, but this is about the band Van Halen, not anything else above and beyond that.
And one of the last thoughts I had before we signed on was, have there been any major rock bands that have been named after someone other than the singer? Just, slight side trivia there. I hadn't really thought about it. We're obviously going to get into the conversation of how much control Eddie has with the band and the, the sound and stuff, but have there been other bands? You got a lot of other bands that, Jimi Hendrix and the Experience and
Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Yeah, Morris Day and the Time, and you look
Huey
at those,
Lewis and the News.
Yeah, but has there been another one that's a different member, even any other different member? I couldn't think.
I mean, I'm sure there probably is, but off the top of my head, it was kind of an obscure question. I never really thought of it that way. I guess
I hadn't either till but getting ready to sign on. I'm like, wait a minute, Van Halen actually wasn't the lead singer.
No, that's true.
So for those that don't know, Eddie Van Halen is the guitar player. I think Alex played drums, and
Michael Anthony was on bass.
Yeah, and they've got one of them's I think Eddie's son's playing drums now.
Wolfgang he's playing bass now.
He's playing bass, okay.
They're touring as Eddie, Wolfgang, Alex, and David Lee Roth again. As of Wikipedia yesterday, that's what the band consists of.
So you're making me go first, okay?
You don't have to. It's
no.
Just chronologically, if you're a Roth fan, he was first. So
I do. It could be a couple different things. It could be time frame of when the switch happened. What would you say it was? It was
85.
85.
Yeah.
That the switch happened. 85 was big transition for us. We moved from, our hometown in Ohio to Florida. So getting used to a new area, vibe, sound was kind of part of what changed us in music. I actually kind of snatched onto hip hop and rap at that point for a little bit. I don't know, it was only because of the area was, big with that, but I didn't really get back into rock until later on. And so that transition time might have been part of it. Right. But for me as a matured music listener, I when I listen to songs between those two, I respect Sammy Hagar, I respect what he did with Van Halen. What album was it they went forward from? Was 5150 actually him?
Yeah, that was the first.
Right.
Hagar,
they had all the big hits on it.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you some knowledge towards that later.
Sure.
But go on.
Yeah. So I think I'd heard a lot of the classic songs, Running with the Devil, Pretty Woman, the cover, obviously, but I think I'd heard a lot of those classic songs on the radio anyways, so might have also been influence, radio influence at that point, that the only radio influence I had because of where we moved to was David Lee Roth. But for me, it's sound. I think, yeah, it's personally for me, I really think his vocals fit the music they were playing at the time. And I think his happy-go-lucky fun attitude, and I wrestled with how to compare this, because again, that's kind of what I do is compare. I think I have the same feeling about Van Halen, the same good feeling I have about Van Halen with David Lee Roth, that I do with Freddie Mercury and Queen. That it was a rock band that was kind of molded by someone who was
larger than life.
That's a good way of putting it. But I mean, if we're gonna fight, we can fight right now if you want. But David Lee Roth had talent, and
no, I'm not there.
Okay.
I'd never argue that. No,
because I don't. Yes, showmanship was kind of part of what David Lee Roth and Freddie Mercury had is they were flamboyant, they were out there, they were in your face. I think you've mentioned Assless Chaps like 3 or 4 times on past podcasts with David Lee Roth, but
yes,
I think that's the way I feel about it. Is I think the music wasn't supposed to go with the singer, but it worked because it was something different, but it was still rock. Queen really drifted a lot more into, lighter sounds and some, disco sounds of the time.
Obscure.
Yeah, but Van Halen kind of kept it rock. They kept it pretty close to rock. And
yeah.
And I will say that when I came back into rock a couple of years later, that's when David Lee Roth was doing his solo career. And with, Steve Vai on guitar, you've got a heck of an album there that he created. That first one,
I will say, Eat 'Em and Smile was, and even Skyscraper.
Yeah.
I liked. I mean, I'm sorry, but if you can't get into Yankee Rose, you don't have a soul for music. I'm sorry.
Look,
it's
and if you think
absolutely hysterical.
If you think you can't, go watch the video. Just
exactly. Yeah.
Seriously.
But even songs like "Just Like Living in Paradise" and stuff like that. And I'm not going to steal your thunder. I appreciate David Lee Roth. Go ahead, continue, please.
No, I think I don't think we've ever, had a problem appreciating the other's tastes or even other people's tastes. I don't think we have a problem appreciating what country music is to
absolutely not
the field, but we certainly have our likes and dislikes, and
right.
I think the problem with me is, and this is even going to make you and I punch at each other a little bit harder, is that I don't like Sammy Hagar, and not even like a little. I mean, those songs that came out are popular when he was with Van Halen. Are popular, and I'm not going to turn them off as long as I don't hear them, 6 times a day like it was when it came out. But I will not seek out the Sammy Hagar era of Van Halen when I go to listen to Van Halen.
See, I wonder if that's just that small age difference between you and I.
Could be. It could be because that, like you said, that the 85 is a big transition for both of us. Again,
right.
We moved.
Yeah,
to a completely different. I mean, we moved from a town of
rural
300
community,
to Tampa, Florida, almost downtown Tampa, Florida.
Yeah,
and again, it was the boom at that time was hip hop and rap, and especially in that area. But it was pretty hot right then, just in general.
Yeah.
But I think you transitioned back into rock before I did.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I ever. I mean, I still listen to some, variants of, because let's face it, that era, 85, that's when License to Ill came out and so on and so forth. So, rap and hip hop had a rock edge to it from that, and I kind of pulled off of that. But I'd still delve into pop and rock and even some R&B and hip hop and so on and so forth. That's never been an issue. But it's always been rock. First.
When did Bring the Noise come out?
91.
Oh, okay, so it was a little bit later. I was just kind of curious.
I'm the Man came out in 87.
Oh, that's right.
7 or 8. So that was, to me, that was more monumental than, because even Aerosmith's crossover with Run DMC wasn't. They did one of their own songs.
Yeah, right. It wasn't
to take
necessarily
a thrash metal band to actually record a truly rap song like "I'm the Man" was very, very, very strange, and it didn't get a lot of love. It still gets some play now and then, but it didn't get a lot of love because it was like. The Slayers and the Metallicas, were taken aback and, almost appalled at the audacity. But I think I'm the Man, to me, is a smooth tie-in. I've always said about Van Halen that David Lee Roth is 10 times the frontman performer that Sammy Hagar will ever be, but the music was different. The writing was better, the music was better, the sound was better with Hagar. I think it's because of Hagar's solo career prior to Van Halen. And you can't, I'm sorry, but if you're doing toe touch jump kicks off of the amplifiers in Assless Chaps, you're a frontman. You are. In 1984, that was the way of the world. Because everybody looked like that, everybody sounded like that, everybody did that, but they did it better because of Eddie Van Halen, because of Alex Van Halen, because of Michael Anthony, and most certainly because of David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth put that band on the map. Eddie Van Halen's going to be a good guitar player. He still is he always was a good guitar player. David Lee Roth made Van Halen in the 80s. Sammy Hagar made Van Halen a band in the late 80s and early 90s, as far as I'm concerned. Because, musically, it's not the same band. And
no, and that's kind of what I was saying with comparing it to Queen is
sure.
I just felt like, man, and I'm going to say the exact same words, and they're going to mean something completely different to me. I'm like, man, they became a band.
Yeah.
And, oh, God.
They were a party band. And that's what everybody was. Quiet Riots, all those rock, if you want to call them metal bands in the early 80s, that's what that was. They were party bands. And, to me, their prowess in the early, and there's no denying songs like Jump and Panama, and I like I will say I like those songs. I just like the Hagar years better because the music was I appreciate party bands and some of their songs and stuff like that, but to me, after the gimmick wears off, there's got to be some substance, and I think that's where they. I do. I honestly believe that.
You're actually saying that there was no substance to songs from David Lee? Oh, you and I are really going to have to throw punches.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying David Lee Roth got to be a gimmick because there's half a dozen songs that they were all good songs. I mean, Jamie's Crying, like you said, Running with the Devil. But their earlier stuff, I mean, I don't want to say didn't have any substance, but I mean, the only way they got as big as they got with Roth was with the antics.
Man, I am. I think we've really come to an episode where we're actually going to disagree on something almost wholeheartedly.
That's
fine. I think
you said wholeheartedly. That was a Gary Sharon reference.
I know. Let's not hold on.
Let's not do that pun.
We're shifting gears way too fast. We'll get there, but we gotta get this out first. You even said it a few seconds ago. Eddie Van Halen was an amazing guitar player from day one.
It still is.
I mean, you listen to Eruption, and it's not.
I like Cathedral better than Eruption, actually.
Well, both of those are not as groundbreaking as people think when you, as a guitar player, and look at it and go, it's not as difficult as people think it is. But the sound that he makes it, he almost makes it feel like.
Yeah.
With the sound that he creates, both the tone and the changes in types of playing at the time were groundbreaking just in general. And a side note, I think that's honestly why David Lee Roth picked Steve Vai for his solo stuff, is because
absolutely because that's what he knew.
Yeah. But to go back to that, and when I listen to those old songs, they were almost polished and unpolished at the same time.
Oh, they were raw. Absolutely.
Yeah, but they kind of weren't, because if you listen to the drum beats, I don't know if they were using kick tracks at the time or click tracks at the time, but his beats are on. And a lot of those 70s and 80s bands like Bonham and for Zeppelin and stuff, there's variances and there's beats that are off. But to look at the talent level of Van Halen at that time and to only say they were off of David Lee Roth makes me angry.
No.
You didn't say only. You didn't say only. I got it. But that is, in that time, that's what I was attracted to. I mean,
no, absolutely.
Honestly, if you look at AC/DC's first run with Bon Scott, Bon Scott was antics, man. Brian Johnson gets up there and Brian Johnson gets up there and sings.
But the sound didn't change.
True.
I mean, the music didn't change.
Right. And that's why I feel so adamant about our differences in this, is because I liked that music. And I think, honestly, a lot of the conversations that people have with the differences between Van Halen with Sammy Hagar and Van Halen with David Lee Roth are because of the music, not because of the singer. The more and more I listened to it, the more and more I thought about it. I didn't have a problem necessarily with Sammy Hagar. I don't like his solo stuff. The Van Halen stuff is iconic, and I don't hate it, but it's the band that was the problem for me. It's the band and how they changed.
I think they matured is the word the best word I could use for it. I think the writing got more mature.
I wouldn't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with the maturity level certainly changed, and I think it could have partly to do with contracts. It could be partly with the record company saying we need something more closer to radio friendly, and that's a possibility. But I really think that the more and more I listened to it, and the more and more I thought about what makes me like David Lee Roth more, wasn't necessarily that I like David Lee Roth more. I think both of them are vocally amazing. Sure. I just think that the band changed, and when that changes the feel of the
right. I think that's where our difference is, because I think the change was for the better, and you think the change was for the worse.
Yeah. Well, and I guess
not necessarily worse, but I know.
I think that I'm only kind of pandering to the crowd a little bit, but I think hate is really way too harsh, but appreciation is way not harsh enough. I really don't. When something off 5150 comes on, I honestly get that moment of, really? Okay. Well, I'll listen, I guess. I get that feeling when Unchained comes on. It's like, sure, this is amazing.
The one, David, and it's from a movie, but I know, Everybody Wants Some, I think, is some of the best recorded playfulness, I guess is the word I will use, ever. I always, that when that song comes on, I refuse to turn it off. I will listen to it all the way through.
Okay.
When you go through Van Halen, Women and Children First, Diver Down, I mean, they basically had six albums. They put 6 albums out, with Roth, from, where's my notes? 74 to 85. They put 6 albums out. They had one number 1 song, and that was Jump in 84. And but 1984 sold 12 million copies, the album, 1984. They put 4 albums out with Sammy Hagar from 85 to 96. All 4 albums went to number 1, and they had 13 number 1 hits off of those albums. That's the difference to me, is in quality. And that's commercial success, not in feel. Not in feel. That I'm taking my personal opinion out of it. I'm just reading the facts.
No, I wanted to do that at some point. I wanted to kind of have that information. I'm glad you pulled it, because, for me, for me, that's an anomaly. Because if you look at what gets played on the radio,
100%. I'm taking personal feel out of it and reading the facts. That was staggering to me, that they had 2 less albums with Hagar, and they had all 4 of them went to number 1. The next closest song they had went to like 13 with Roth.
But you hear all those songs
I'm not arguing. I know.
And we brought up For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge a couple weeks ago on one of the other episodes, and Right Now came off of that. And honestly, that's the only one I hear on the radio anymore from the Hagar era. Occasionally I'll hear 1 or 2.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. Even down here, excuse me, Tampa radio, it's... And that goes back, we could even tie that into, like, we've argued, should radio go away, because they're still playing Lynyrd Skynyrd, they're still playing Journey, and these are contemporary rock radio. I mean, not like classic rock radio. But if I turn on classic rock radio, sure, I mean, all I'm get is Jamie's Crying or Running with the Devil, or I don't get, Dreams or anything like that from the Hagar era.
Yeah, and you don't hear... I mean, how many hits were there off 5150? There must have been 2 or 3 that charted pretty high, I'd guess.
4 of them.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that was a groundbreaking album on that one. We're not going to certainly deny that, that whole influence on the rock community. But
same with OU812. There's a number of songs off that for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. All I was saying was the commercial success was I couldn't believe the difference. The staggering difference, and you beat me to it because of the radio play of Roth, of the Roth era, that there's this level of, wow, what did they really have? I mean, they just had a lot of good songs that didn't have much commercial success, but yet they're the ones that get played, but yet the Hagar era had all this monumental commercial success and sales and very little radio play anymore.
Well,
so
anymore
that's
is the
anomaly to me,
because
it is hard for me, because I like Sammy Hagar. I still watch his road trip with Sammy Hagar and try to, I just dig the guy. I mean, he makes his own tequila and whatever. But I do get the appeal of David Lee Roth, and those songs are undeniable. And I guess I should have prefaced all of this with, I don't dislike David Lee Roth or the era or his music. I'm just more of a fan of Hagar's, that Van Halen version, because to me the music was better. Yeah, it had more substance, more quality, more whatever you want to call it, more balls. I just liked the sound better. It was more refined, and Eddie wasn't so predominant. And I get burned out quickly with the David Lee Roths, with the Axl Rose, with the Liam Gallagher's, if you want to make good music, fine. Just stop telling us how great it is, and you know what I mean. We got into that with Chinese Democracy. And I think Eddie. I think that's what the difference was. I mean, because Sammy, wrote and recorded his own music and was a above average guitar player in his own right, and played, there was some of that where Roth didn't do that. Roth was a front man, and I think that difference is what necessarily broke. I think Eddie liked Hagar's sound, and we'll get to that eventually too, but I think he liked the sound better, but I don't think he liked the creative clash with Hagar, because whatever Eddie wrote, Dave sang. You know what I mean? And there was more of a collective collaboration with a singer, songwriter, musician with Hagar that he didn't have with Roth. And that doesn't take away from Roth's talents or abilities or anything like that. I think Eddie had a lot more control during the David Lee Roth era than he did with Hagar. And I don't think he feels like he prospered as much. And then when you get to Van Halen 3, the one album that I don't know if we're saving that or not. I mean, you can tell the difference, because you said it earlier. I think you messaged me or something yesterday that I'm listening to. It sounds like David Lee Roth music with Hagar singing, and that's as glaring a reality check on Van Halen 3 with Gary Cherone, whom sang for Extreme.
Well, let's set that up real quick. So there was one album.
Yes.
In what year was it?
96.
98 actually was when it was released.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there was one album where, like you said, the lead singer from Extreme, who was, how do we put Extreme into something?
I mean, they were rock pop. Yeah, rock pop.
Everybody knows more than words. I mean, I don't. That's like it's like timeless. I mean, you can ask kids of any age, and they're going to be able to tell you what that song is.
And probably sing it word for word.
Yeah, exactly. My son can sing, and that's pretty scary. He's 11. Yeah. But there was one album they created at that time after, I don't know why Hagar left at that point. There was an Eddie
Creative
Hagar.
differences, yeah.
Yeah. So they created an album with this singer. And don't get me wrong, I was an Extreme fan. There was I was big into Extreme when they were out because, I mean, who wasn't at the time? You know, it was ballad and verse ballad rock on same album, and I was sold. But
Nuno Betancourt is a extremely
amazing
talented guitar player. Yeah, sure.
But you know, I vaguely remembered, and you brought it up to me about a week ago, and I had forgotten, just like you had forgotten. You had somebody tell you.
I'm calling him out. Sean Pierce said, you should go back and listen to Van Halen 3. I'm like, I forgot about that. We were having the Van Hagar, Van Halen deal, I
so wish I wouldn't have done that because, wow. Me too. It is, okay, so you coined my phrase just a few minutes ago. It felt like that experimental outside world rock with Sammy Hagar singing. And when I say it sounded like Sammy Hagar singing,
he was trying.
It sounds like Sammy Hagar is singing.
Yeah.
There is no sugarcoating that at all. If you listen to that album and you didn't know any better, you would think it
bad.
It was I don't know if they altered his voice, because I've listened to, Extreme quite a bit at that point in time, and I even went back and listened to a couple songs just to see, what I was missing. And
wait, does he really sound like that?
I have no idea what they did to his voice, because he doesn't normally sound like Sammy Hagar. But wow, and there wasn't, the creativeness that we've kind of just talked about with David Lee Roth era, and how it was kind of experimental and not necessarily four on the floor rock.
Right.
That creativeness wasn't even there.
It was like horrible. It was a horrible album.
It was like they said, hey, let's go back to our roots and let's kind of play music like we used to, and we'll put this guy here that,
sounds like we had a guy we had popular success with, and see if it works.
Ooh, man, there's some...
The answer is no, it did not work.
There's a couple, brief moments where I went, whatever.
I didn't even look. I don't even know if it registered on the charts or sales. I'm sure it didn't either.
I'm going to look real quick while you're doing. Go ahead.
But I don't want to browbeat Gary Cherone and his talent, or they did actually produce and make an album. But I did read one interesting fact, that they're one of only 5 bands, Van Halen as a whole, to have 2 albums sell more than 10 million copies, and that's one in Roth's era and one in Hagar's era, which I thought was rather unique.
This one barely made gold.
It sold 100,000 copies?
It actually had a #1 hit.
Really? It's got to be just because of the name, like Chinese Democracy. It's sold because of the name.
The mainstream rock tracks, it was position #1, Without You.
Yeah, I mean, that song is palatable.
That's the one that
sounds least like Sammy Hagar singing. I will say that.
Well, I actually queued it up on Spotify on my phone. So again, it's a mix. It doesn't play in an order. And the first song that came up was From Afar, and I don't know if
that's really bad. That's really bad.
I almost stopped right there. I
really don't get. I mean, I really wonder. Eddie must have been. I'm sorry, must have been dealing with throat cancer or whatever at the time or something, because there's no way that anybody in that room thought that was a good idea.
Well, but let's we've got the elephant in the room out. Let's tie that back in though, because how far were they from the last Hagar album on that?
Oh, what was the miles. Because
I mean time frame.
2 years.
Yeah, 3 years. So they weren't far off from being in a studio and writing. What was the album before it? Was that For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge before it, or was there something else after that?
No, I think that was the last one with Hagar.
Actually,
they released the greatest hits.
Balance was
yes,
in between
them. Yes.
So, and it was only 3 years between those two, so it wasn't like they, had gotten out of the groove of playing or writing music. They had written an album, just 3 years before, and it doesn't seem like a lot of time, but I guess it could be. But I mean, it is noticeably different from anything. I mean, it kind of felt like they were trying to relive David Lee Roth era music.
Right.
But
and
wow.
That's a glaring example. You just made my point. That's a glaring example of how much difference Hagar made in the writing, songwriting. I mean, how much difference he made in the quality, I think. Because you said it yourself. It sounded like David Lee Roth music with Hagar singing. And I think that's the big difference.
So to circle that back in, you're Sammy Hagar all the way. We've kind of got that. And you are also solo career, right?
I do. I do like Sammy Hagar. I think he's. I mean, obviously with he's still singing and performing at 70. But I do like some of the, if I never hear I Can't Drive 55 again, thank you, Pete Pardo, I would never, I'd be fine with that. If it comes on the radio, it's like, oh, here we go again. If I'm sitting in traffic, it's almost, I don't know, picturesque,
cliche.
I guess. Yeah, it's almost like, okay, you know what, I'm going to listen to this because it's pissing me off too. But like Three Lock Box and some of his early stuff, but even later on, where Eagles Fly and stuff like that, I enjoyed. But see, the transition between Sammy Hagar's solo work and Van Halen with Sammy Hagar is not a great reach.
No, it's not.
It's just a better guitar player backing him up, and better drummer, and better bass player, because Michael Anthony, God love that guy, gets no love from anybody in any of these conversations. That guy is probably one of the top 3 bass players on the planet, and I would swear to it, because he has played with anybody and everybody and played for bands. The band that he was in for all those years sold 80 million albums. So say what you want, I'm giving Michael Anthony some love, and he still plays with Chickenfoot and Hagar and so on and so forth. All that being said, Hagar's solo career was a very short reach and a very straight line to Van Halen, because there's not much difference other than a little bit better backing band. I think his talent took Van Halen where they should have been, but I've never denied David Lee Roth's talent or abilities to sing, perform, and even the background stuff. I mean, we've made jokes for years about the Brown M&Ms clause, the contract writer clause. About, well, if they didn't have a bowl full of M&Ms with all the brown M&Ms taken out, they got them free reign to trash the venue. Well, that started off as a joke, but it's actually, they put that in there to like promote safety, because I guess they had a couple crew members almost get electrocuted because of these concert venues weren't reading their contracts and stuff like that for them to play at these venues, and the stages were shoddy, and the pyrotechnics were shoddy, and the electronics were shoddy. So they put those writers in to make sure that these venues started so that's industry wide now, the writers, and I'm sure it's turned into the, they have to have caviar and white wine in their green room or whatever now. But that started out as a kind of a joke, but turned into a valid industry wide to make sure that these places actually read their contracts. And Roth started that. That was his baby. All that being said, I would never deny Van Halen's prowess, talent, or music during the David Lee Roth era. This is simply a personal disagreement that I think the music was way better with Sammy Hagar. And you could argue it till let the cows come home, and it just winds up being personal opinion.
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to say that the music with Sammy Hagar was way different.
Absolutely.
You said it.
And let's just be clear on one thing. They shouldn't have made Van Halen 3.
Yeah, that's. Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, Gary. I'm sorry. You should have done it.
But it's funny, though, because we started this conversation with, are there any other bands out there that are named after the guitar player or, somebody else in the band? And, we also had this conversation with Chinese Democracy. Had you not put Guns N' Roses on that title, you might have had something really groundbreaking and really different.
Sure.
So the problem with it is Van Halen was still there. I mean, it wasn't like, you actually, I'm going to have a little pet peeve argument with you too. Everybody's always done the Van Halen, Van Hagar. Well, it's always going to be Van Halen. It's just going to be David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar.
Sure. No, I know.
And I know everybody uses that terminology, but so you were you had no choice. I mean, that was going to be a Van Halen album regardless.
Right.
And I think we kind of touched on it outside of here, but we'll just kind of throw it in there that, his control of the music might have been what you have issues with the David Lee Roth era. You even mentioned it before that, kind of Eddie wrote it, David Lee Roth sang it. And
I think the control that Eddie has over the music eventually wound up being the demise of Van Halen.
Yeah, because the first album was a lot more. The first couple were very collaborative, and even up to For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, there was some songs on there that felt collaborative, but it really started taking a turn after the first two albums.
Yeah, I agree.
Into
creative differences is the only way you can put it. I mean, to put a term on it.
Yeah, and I think that came through in the music too. I think that came through in the sound and the lack of cohesion between music and singer, and I think that's why I feel so adamant about the David Lee Roth era being the better era for me for sure, is that I think that cohesiveness worked all the way up until the end. Like, the last album that they put out
was 1984.
Was it 1984? And I mean, you can deny it if you want, but there is
I remember
perfect mix and everything.
That was one of the first CDs I actually bought, and I remember the little angel baby smoking cigarettes and thinking, wow, this is really cool. And it was one of those, you can play it front to back. There's not a bad song on it.
I mean, Hot for Teacher. Come on.
See, I will turn that song off anymore. I can't. I can't anymore.
After the intro, though, right?
No, I mean, even being a fan of the drums, Alex Van Halen's drumming has always been a point of contention with me. I think he didn't want to be overshadowed by his brother, his guitar work. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I like Van Halen. Their sound is very unique. From, the first Van Halen album to even Van Halen 3, their drums sound the same. Their guitar sounds the same. The singers, vary, but there's still that high range of, Roth and Hagar's chops are in the upper range of singing, but they also had that, feel, I guess. But Roth always, to me, most of the time, always sound like Roth was talking the lyrics.
Sometimes, yeah.
As much as, but he could hit that, ear piercing high note, and where Haggard's voice, he doesn't have like a beautiful singing voice, but I always dug that raspy, melodic sound. And I think Hagar's voice, because Eddie sings a lot of, and Michael Anthony, they sang a lot of back. There were a lot of harmonizing, and I think there wasn't as much opportunity with Roth as there was Hagar, because Hagar could keep up with those two.
where Roth just let them sing back up and he'd sing over them or talk over them or play over them, you know what I mean? And I think that was kind of like the major difference in the sound. But the campiness of, and I hate that word, the lightheartedness of the music of most of the Van Halen hits with David Lee Roth, you know, harken back to like a ZZ Top. There was a lot of sexual innuendo. There was a lot of, you know, like you mentioned Unchained, you know, you can hear like, come on, Dave, give me a break. You know, there was a lot of, Everybody Wants Some. There was a lot of that. But I mean, when you hear like Drop Dead Legs, I mean, those songs, they're undeniable. And I most certainly have no disrespect or dislike for any of that stuff. I just prefer, you know, Sammy Hagar's version of that band, leading that band more than I do Roth. So, and I know we've been over that 10 times already. So
no, but I think it also goes to what this argument's been classically in the history of people listening to rock and roll, and I think we're obviously on the very shallow end of disagreement because I think we have a lot more respect for the different genres and different types of music. And I think this argument can get out of hand. This argument, you know, I'm joking and throwing punches at you, but this argument can get way out of hand with some people.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I'm not jumping too far back, but I did want to mention that, you know, we talked about the different, you know, when the last couple albums of Hagar era kind of really dropped off a little bit, but then we talked about David Lee Roth, you know, those albums still being pretty good. 1984, Panama was on that, man.
Oh yeah,
I mean it jumped.
Panama, yeah, jumped. No, that's what I said. It sold 12 million copies.
And you're talking about that was the last album before the change, and man, I was thinking they were on earlier albums, but man, that's crazy. But yeah, to come back around to that, I think our conversations about this are fun, and I enjoyed talking about it because it's always been, as I said, it's always been the classic.
It's always been a thorn.
Yeah, and it's always been the classic argument between anybody that cares about rock at any level. And you know, I venture to guess that, you know, we're obviously not the first, you know.
Oh no, I've had this conversation with a number of people. Yes.
No, I'm saying we're probably not obviously the first publication, podcast, you know, interview, whatever out there that's tackled this. But I feel that if we've got a podcast about music, that it had to come up at some point. It has to be addressed, yes. It has to be addressed at some point. I mean, you know, we've even kicked around the Bon Scott, Brian Johnson question as well, but we both sit on the same side on that one, and it would still be an interesting conversation. But I've just always thought that, you know, I don't think I actually knew that you felt that way. I really didn't. You know, bless you. We came into an era of music at the time when that stuff was, you know, hot, right, and in rock, and they were a pretty popular band, even though the numbers didn't show it. You know, Van Halen's Roth era still gets played a lot on the radio.
Sure, absolutely.
But I think that, you know, I don't think I've ever really, you know, we've done it in passing here and there, but I don't think I ever really got a solid, hey, I'm this or hey, I'm that, and until a couple weeks ago.
when you said, you know, spoiler alert, I'm a Roth fan. I didn't surprise me, but it was like, wow, really? Why? That guy sucks. No, I didn't think that. But
good.
No, it's definitely, it's an argument that's worth having. I mean, like you said, and we've kind of beat a dead horse. If you're into music at all, I mean, you know,
don't listen to 3.
Yes, first and foremost, do not put on Van Halen 3. If you're a fan of either David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar, do not listen to Van Halen 3.
Or you want to be a fan and you've never heard of them before, which I doubt it. But
don't pick that one to start.
Don't start with that one.
And I'm going to say his name again, Sean. I'm still mad at you for making me listen to it because that's horrible. That's a tragedy. That's a crime against humanity as far as the Van Halen album.
And
Chinese Democracy. That's a parallel line, man. Chinese Democracy. That's a That's a pale experience for a Guns N' Roses album, and Van Halen 3 shouldn't have been made. So I'm just saying.
There's the tagline for this podcast right there. Well, we'll seal it up, and I conversation's out. Everybody knows, but we definitely want to hear you guys' feedback. Even
Absolutely.
If you just post one name or the other and tag Musing __ on Twitter and just say, Hagar or David Lee Roth, and just, blow it up.
Let us know, or get into great detail at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com.
Yeah, perfect. So we'll catch up to you in a couple weeks then, brother?
Absolutely. I'll be here.
Okay, have a good one.
All right. See ya.
We want to talk to you about music, so reach out to us at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com.
You can also find us on most social media sites by searching Music Musing or George or Craig Seibert, SYBERT.
And you can also find us on Twitter as musicmusing_ as well.
Thank you for listening to this Music Musing podcast.